They conquered the known world with iron and discipline, building an empire that stretched from the sands of Egypt to the misty shores of Britain. But Rome's true power wasn't just in their swords and spears. What made their legions invincible for centuries? What turned ordinary men into the most feared warriors of the ancient world? The answer lies in secret weapons you've never seen in Hollywood movies. Weapons so innovative, so ahead of their time that some of their principles are still used in modern warfare today. What if I told you that Rome's greatest weapon wasn't the Gladius or the Pilum? What if their most powerful tool was something so simple, so ingenious, that we still use its basic concept in modern military strategy? Something that changed not just how wars were fought, but how entire civilizations developed. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden arsenal that built an empire. We'll reveal the secrets behind the tactics, engineering, and psychological warfare that made Rome virtually indestructible for over 500 years. And here's the fascinating part. One of these weapons might be hiding in plain sight in your daily life. You're about to discover how Rome's military genius went far beyond what your history teachers told you. From revolutionary siege engines to psychological warfare tactics that would make modern military strategists jealous, we're diving deep into the real tools that forged the greatest empire of the ancient world. Before we march into battle, make sure you join our legion. Hit that like button like a Roman shield wall hitting the enemy lines, share this video with your history-loving friends, and subscribe to Imperium Chronicles for more epic tales from the ancient world. Now, let's unveil Rome's deadliest secrets. Let's talk about the Gladius, Rome's deadliest secret. Forget everything Hollywood has taught you about Roman swords. While movies love to show legionnaires wielding long, flashy blades, the real killing machine was a masterpiece of efficiency. The Gladius, a mere 24 inches of lethal steel. You might think that's small for a sword, and you'd be right, but that was exactly what made it so deadly. The Romans didn't create the Gladius themselves. They actually stole the design from Spanish warriors during the Punic Wars. After seeing how effective these short swords were, they did what Romans did best. They copied it, improved it, and turned it into the most efficient killing tool of the ancient world. But here's where it gets interesting. The Gladius wasn't designed for fancy swordplay or dramatic duels. This was a pure killing machine, developed for one purpose: to work in tight, shoulder-to-shoulder formations. The Roman technique was brutally simple: thrust, don't slash. A legionnaire would hold his shield up, protect himself, and strike forward like a snake, straight into the enemy's gut. This stabbing technique was so effective that a skilled legionnaire could punch through chainmail armor like it was butter. Think about that for a moment. Chainmail was considered high-tech protection in the ancient world, and the Gladius turned it into tissue paper. Here's a detail that will blow your mind. In close combat, Roman soldiers were trained to aim their Gladius upward, under the ribs. One thrust could pierce through vital organs, ending a fight in seconds. This wasn't just warfare, it was brutal efficiency, perfected through centuries of combat experience. The Gladius became so synonymous with Roman power that the word itself simply means sword in Latin. But this wasn't just any sword. It was the sword that built an empire, one thrust at a time. Picture this. You're a Celtic warrior, shield raised high, charging toward the Roman lines with your brothers beside you. Suddenly, a javelin comes flying through the air. You raise your shield, it hits. You've blocked it successfully. Or so you think. But here's where things get terrifying. This wasn't just any spear. This was a pilum, and the Romans had turned it into the most diabolical trap ever devised for ancient warfare. See, while your enemy expected their shields to save them, Roman engineers had other plans. The pilum looked like a normal javelin from a distance, but its design was absolutely genius in its cruelty. The iron tip was deliberately made soft, almost fragile. When it slammed into your wooden shield, instead of bouncing off like a normal spear, the metal head would bend and twist, creating this massive hook that made your shield completely useless. Imagine trying to fight with a 6-foot javelin hanging from your arm, weighing you down, making every movement impossible. You couldn't pull it out because of the bent metal, You couldn't cut it off because the shaft was too thick, and you certainly couldn't fight effectively with this anchor dragging you down. You had two choices: drop your shield and face Roman swords completely defenseless, or keep struggling with this dead weight attached to your arm. But wait, it gets even more clever. Roman legionaries didn't carry just one pilum. They carried two different types, and each one had a specific job in their killing machine. The lighter pilum was thrown first, from about 50 to 60 feet away. This one was designed for accuracy and distance. Think of it as the opening shot that started the chaos. Then came the heavy pilum, thrown from much closer range, maybe 20 to 30 feet. This monster was designed to punch through armor, break formations, and create absolute pandemonium just before the legionaries charged in with their swords. The psychological effect was devastating. Enemy warriors would see this wall of javelins coming at them in two waves, knowing that even if they blocked them, their shields would become useless. Many battles were won before the Romans even drew their swords, simply because entire enemy formations would break apart trying to deal with these twisted pieces of metal hanging from their arms. What's truly remarkable is that this wasn't some accident of design. Roman military engineers specifically calculated the metallurgy to make the tips bend at exactly the right angle. Too hard, and they'd bounce off. Too soft, and they wouldn't penetrate in the first place. They found that perfect sweet spot where the pilum would punch through, then immediately become this inescapable trap. And here's a detail that gives you chills. After battles, Romans would actually collect the bent pila and have blacksmiths straighten them out for reuse. They had turned warfare into an industrial process, complete with recycling programs for their terror weapons. The pilum wasn't just changing individual fights. It was revolutionizing how entire armies approached combat. Enemies started designing new shield shapes, trying different materials, even changing their entire battle formations just to counter this one Roman weapon. But the Romans kept adapting too, tweaking the design, adjusting the weight distribution, always staying one step ahead. This is why Rome conquered the known world. It wasn't just about being brave or disciplined, though they were both. It was about turning war into a science where every weapon was precisely engineered to solve a specific problem on the battlefield. The pilum solved the shield problem, and once your enemy's shields were useless, the rest was just cleanup work for the legionaries with their short swords. Now forget everything Hollywood has taught you about Roman shields. Those tiny round bucklers you see in gladiator movies? Complete nonsense. The real Roman scutum was an absolute monster. A 4-foot-tall curved wall of wood, leather, and iron that could literally crush a man to death. Picture this. You're facing a Roman legion, and what you see marching toward you isn't individual soldiers. It's a moving fortress. Each legionary carries a scutum that's taller than most people back then, weighing 22 pounds of pure defensive terror. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. This wasn't just for protection. The Romans had weaponized their shields. The scutum was curved like a section of a cylinder, which meant when a Roman soldier punched forward with it, all that weight and momentum could shatter ribs, break arms, or send an enemy warrior flying backward. Roman training manuals actually taught specific techniques for shield bashing. They called it shield punch combat, and a well-executed strike could knock a grown man unconscious or even kill him outright. But the real genius came when these shields worked together. Have you ever heard of the testudo formation? Testudo means tortoise in Latin, and when you see it in action, you'll understand why this was basically Rome's version of a tank, 2,000 years before tanks were invented. Here's how it worked. The front rank would hold their scutums forward, creating an impenetrable wall. The ranks behind them would raise their shields overhead, overlapping them like roof tiles. The soldiers on the sides would angle their shields outward. What you ended up with was this moving armored box that arrows, spears, and rocks just bounced off harmlessly. Ancient historians tell us that testudo formations were so tight that you could literally walk across the top of them. Soldiers could march underneath enemy arrow storms without a single casualty. But here's where it gets really terrifying. While they're protecting themselves perfectly, Roman soldiers inside the testudo could still fight back through gaps in the shields, stabbing outward with their swords like some kind of armored porcupine. The psychological effect was devastating. Imagine being a Celtic or Germanic warrior, watching this unstoppable metal monster crawling toward your fortifications. You'd shoot arrows at it, they'd bounce off. You'd throw spears, nothing. Rocks, boiling oil, whatever you had. The testudo just kept coming, and there was absolutely nothing you could do to stop it. And here's a detail that shows you just how seriously Romans took their shield training. New recruits had to practice with shields that weighed twice as much as the real thing. By the time they got their actual combat scutum, it felt light as a feather. They could march 25 miles a day carrying all their gear, including that massive shield, and still be ready to fight at the end. But the scutum wasn't just about defense and formation fighting. Individual Roman soldiers used them in ways that would make modern fighters jealous. They'd use the curved edge to hook enemy weapons and yank them away. They'd slam the iron boss in the center into opponents' faces. Some veterans even learned to use the shield's curve to deflect attacks into nearby enemies. The construction itself was a masterpiece of engineering. 3 layers of wooden strips, glued and pressed together, then covered in leather and canvas, with an iron rim and a bronze or iron boss in the center. The whole thing was painted with unit insignias and battle honors, so not only was it a weapon, it was also a billboard advertising which legion was about to destroy you. Now here's something that'll make you appreciate Roman logistics. Each legion needed about 5,000 of these shields, and they wore out constantly from combat and training. Rome had entire industrial complexes dedicated to nothing but shield production. They'd figured out mass manufacturing techniques that wouldn't be seen again until the Industrial Revolution. You know what's really incredible? Archaeologists have found scutum fragments that show battle damage, deep gouges, spear holes, sword cuts, but the shields held together. These weren't just pieces of wood. They were life-saving technology that kept Roman soldiers alive long enough to conquer the world. Did you know that a scutum weighing 22 pounds when swung by a trained legionary could actually knock a horse off its feet? Roman cavalry units would sometimes dismount and use their shields as battering rams against enemy formations. And if you're enjoying these incredible war secrets, join the Legion right now. Smash that like button, share this with your future emperor friends, and subscribe for more epic history. Drop a comment and tell me, which Roman weapon would you choose for battle? The clever Pilum, the brutal Gladius, or this unstoppable Scutum Shield? The Scutum represents everything that made Rome terrifying. They took something as basic as a shield and turned it into a multi-purpose weapons system that could, defend, attack, and form the backbone of tactical formations that dominated battlefields for centuries. Picture this. While your enemies are still throwing rocks and shooting arrows, you're unleashing bolts the size of spears that can punch through shields, armor, and even stone walls from 400 meters away. Welcome to Rome's ancient artillery, the ballista. Their version of a guided missile that terrorized battlefields centuries before gunpowder was even invented. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Romans didn't actually invent this devastating weapon. They stole it. And they weren't ashamed about it either. The Greeks had been using a primitive version called the catapult, but leave it to Roman engineering genius to take someone else's design and turn it into an absolute monster. The ballista was basically a giant crossbow on steroids. Imagine 2 twisted bundles of sinew and horsehair, yes, actual horsehair, that created torsion pressure so intense it could launch a 3-foot iron bolt with enough force to skewer multiple enemies in a single shot. Roman engineers discovered that animal sinew, when twisted tight, stored incredible amounts of energy. It was like having a coiled spring the size of a wagon wheel. But here's what made Roman ballistae truly terrifying: their precision. While other armies were lobbing stones and hoping for the best, Roman artillery crews could hit a man-sized target at distances that would make modern snipers proud. They had adjustable sights, calculated trajectories, and even specialized ammunition for different situations. Need to break down a wall? Use a heavy stone projectile. Want to clear enemy troops? switched to the iron bolts that could punch through 3 men standing in a line. And get this, the Romans were so confident in their ballista technology that they mounted them on ships. Picture a Roman galley bristling with these mechanical beasts, turning naval battles into floating artillery duels. Enemy ships would find themselves being picked apart piece by piece from distances they couldn't even respond to. The psychological impact was just as devastating as the physical damage. Imagine being a Celtic warrior or Germanic tribesman, charging into battle with your sword and shield, only to watch your fellow warriors literally disappear in explosions of splinters and blood from weapons that seemed to strike from the heavens themselves. Many battles were won before they even began, simply because the enemy had heard whispers of Rome's iron thunder. Roman ballista crews became the elite artillery specialists of the ancient world. They could assemble and disassemble their weapons in minutes, calculate wind speed and distance by instinct, and maintain their equipment in conditions that would break lesser machines. These weren't just soldiers, they were ancient engineers of destruction, and they knew it. So the next time someone tells you that ancient warfare was just about muscle and bronze, remind them that Rome was launching precision strikes and conducting siege warfare with mechanical engineering that wouldn't look out of place in a medieval castle, except they were doing it 1,000 years earlier with nothing but wood, iron, and twisted animal hair. While everyone pictures Roman power through the glint of swords and the march of sandaled feet, Rome's greatest weapon wasn't forged in any armory. It was literally beneath their feet. The Romans understood something profound that many empires missed. Conquest means nothing without control, and control requires movement. The vast network of over 50,000 miles of roads they built across 3 continents wasn't just infrastructure. It was the ancient world's most devastating weapon system. Picture this. While their enemies struggled through muddy paths and dense forests, Roman legions marched on perfectly engineered highways at astonishing speeds, 40 kilometers per day in full armor and gear. When trouble erupted in distant Britain or rebellions flared in Judea, Rome could deploy troops with a speed that seemed supernatural to their enemies. These weren't simple dirt tracks. Roman roads were engineering marvels built to outlast empires, and many still exist today, 2,000 years later. They dug deep foundations, layered different materials for drainage, and crowned roads for water runoff. The famous phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," wasn't poetry, it was military doctrine. But roads weren't just for armies, they were information superhighways. The imperial postal system, the cursus publicus, could relay messages across the empire at 100 kilometers per day. A general's orders from Rome could reach Spain in under 2 weeks. This was the ancient equivalent of having real-time intelligence, while your enemies relied on rumors and smoke signals. Think about how this changed warfare forever. Before a rival power even knew Romans were coming, legions would already be crossing their borders. By the time they gathered forces, Roman supply lines were fully established on these same roads. The psychological effect was devastating. Rome seemed omnipresent, striking anywhere with impossible speed. Perhaps the most fascinating parallel is how we've recreated this advantage today. Our highways, flight paths, and especially the internet serve exactly the same function as those ancient stone roads. We've built our modern empire on instantaneous communication and rapid movement. The Romans would recognize our strategy immediately. Only our materials have changed. So next time you drive down a perfectly straight highway or send a message that arrives halfway across the world in seconds, remember, you're using Rome's most powerful weapon, reimagined for our age. The question remains, are we using this power as wisely as they did? Or is our digital empire following the same path that eventually led to Rome's downfall? You know what's fascinating? Rome didn't fall because they ran out of weapons. They had the Gladius. They had the Pilum. They had those incredible roads we talked about. No, Rome fell when they forgot how to use them effectively. Think about it for a moment. Whether we're talking about a simple Gladius or an entire network of stone roads stretching across 3 continents, the real power wasn't in the weapon itself. It was in adaptation, The Romans were masters at taking something good and making it better. They saw Greek fire and improved it. They encountered Celtic swords and redesigned them into the deadly Gladius. They learned siege techniques from the Carthaginians and turned them into an art form. This lesson isn't just ancient history, my friends. It applies to empires, it applies to businesses, and yes, it even applies to your own life. The most successful people throughout history weren't necessarily the ones with the best tools. They were the ones who knew how to adapt those tools to changing circumstances. The Roman legions that conquered Gaul under Julius Caesar weren't using dramatically different weapons than the legions that lost at the Teutoburg Forest decades later. But they had forgotten the core principle that made Rome great: constant adaptation and innovation. So here's my challenge for you. If you were a Roman general, but instead of conquering Gaul, you had to conquer YouTube, which weapon from today's video would you choose? Would you go with the Gladius approach? Short, precise, and devastatingly effective content. Maybe the Pilum strategy. Videos that disable your competition's defenses? Or perhaps the Roman road method, building a network that connects everything together. Share your conquest strategy in the comments below. I genuinely want to know which approach resonates with you. And hey, if this video helped you see Roman warfare in a new light, show some love with a like. Share it with that friend who thinks they know everything about ancient history. And don't forget to subscribe to Imperium Chronicles for more secrets from the past that still shape our world today. Until next time, remember, the best weapon is always the one you know how to use. Av at cavalry.